We'll move on to item 4, which is an approval of the Q1 2019 update of our decarbonization strategy and programs roadmap. And we have our Director of Decarbonization and Grid Innovation Programs, Amy Bailey. Welcome.
Did I hear earlier that she's the smartest director of decarb programs in the state? Is that what I heard?
No pressure, Amy.
Yeah. Way to build up expectations, Panama. Okay, so thank you very much, directors, for the opportunity to speak. This is the first, actually, quarterly update for the Decarb Strategy and Programs Roadmap. And this presentation has two different parts. The first part focusing on the quarterly update, and then we've also tacked on a second item, specifically a request for an additional program area that we've seen a need for and would like your input and guidance on. So for the quarterly program update, if you recall back in December, as a part of the Decarb Strategy and Programs Roadmap, we proposed a specific policy for reporting and review, specifically to provide a quarterly report to the board and then carry out a roughly annual review process where we'd carry out stakeholder engagement to review the entire portfolio and progress towards meeting our GHG goals. So this is the first quarterly update that covers January through March of this year. So the high-level message is that the roadmap development, or implementation rather, is proceeding on schedule and on budget. We can go into some more detail about that, specifically the documents that are in the board packet. I wanted to highlight what they are and kind of how we structured it that way. So there are three distinct parts that I'd like to point out. First is attachment 1. And so this is kind of the official quarterly report. It includes bulleted highlights, a timeline, a summary timeline chart, a summary budget chart, and then also a table that goes through program by program, what have been the major milestones from the past quarter and kind of what's the outlook going forward. Second, for those that are looking for more detail that's in that attachment, we also wanted to provide revised program briefs. And so these program briefs are the 2 to 3 page more detailed descriptions of the program approach. And so those are included as attachment 2. And then a third document that I wanted to highlight, which we do not have at this point, but it's mentioned here in the third bullet, is a kind of PR version of the quarterly update. And so this is intended to be a jazzy, engaging one-pager that's intended more for the general public. And so we saw a need for this, certainly from conversations with board members and at a staff level. So this is intended to be something we can go to our customers with, constituents with, other elected officials, state agencies, et cetera. So we unfortunately don't have that tonight, but that's forthcoming. And so we tried to take an onion approach where there were different layers of detail. For those just wanting the highest level of detail, probably the one-pager is sufficient. A bit more detail, they can look at attachment 1, and then attachment 2 has a greater amount of detail. But this is the first time we're doing this, so we welcome any feedback that you all have on these 3 documents. Like, do they give you kind of the information you need? Is there information that you're seeking that's not in there that should be? Are there better ways to communicate what we're doing? Any sort of feedback you have, we can help make improvements for certainly the next quarter, or if needed on an interim basis. And so I will go through in a bit more detail, so maybe 5 to 10 minutes, some updates on the program areas. We thought it might be best, given that we do have some more board members, and since this is the first time. So this is just a summary timeline of the program's portfolio. So we're focused on Q1. You can see from the color coding there were a number of different programs that are in development now, and some that have actually already launched. And so we'll go through them by program area. So the first program area is power supply. And the priority program is C&I clean power offerings. And that's to develop, market, and sell additional SVCE power offerings for our C&I customers. And so the goal of this program really is customer retention. But I think more than that, it's retention or preservation of the GHG emissions reductions that we've been able to achieve by launching SVCE. And so we're on track to launch pilot offerings to our C&I customers in Q4 of this year. Okay, so for the next program area, the built environment, so you've already had a lot of information about the built environment from Panama and his inspiring talk this evening. So I'll try to be brief here. So buildings in our service territory are responsible for around a third of our emissions, and we have a lot of work to do to decarbonize them. And so we have 3 program areas, and the focus is largely new construction. So the first program area is working with our member agencies and developing really forward-thinking building electrification and EV charging infrastructure codes for adoption in the next building code cycle. And so we partnered with PCE. We went through a competitive solicitation process to hire a technical consultant and then launched this effort back in January. And we've carried out several member agency meetings and held kickoff workshops with broader stakeholder groups. And we'll actually be unveiling the draft model codes tomorrow. So over the coming few months, it's going to be a big effort. Educating and engaging different stakeholder groups. We have a fairly extensive stakeholder engagement plan, and we'll be soliciting feedback and making revisions to that model code. But the kind of bottom line is that we're on track for to support our member agencies in bringing those codes to their councils in Q3 of this year. And then there are 2 other programs in the built environment that kind of round out what we're doing there, specifically our heat pump water heater program, co-funded by the Air District, and then also our all-electric showcase grants program. And so in one of Panama's slides, he highlighted a SMUD program to provide incentives for all-electric new construction. So we've been having a number of conversations with them. This program is taking kind of lessons learned from their program, basically. And so those are on track to launch in June and July of this year. Okay, so for the next program area, mobility, transportation is responsible for half of our community emissions. So it's a very key sector for us to tackle in order to achieve climate goals. And the first program out the gate really is working with our member agency staff on the development of an EV infrastructure strategy and plan. And so there's a nice highlight in attachment 1 that kind of describes where we are. With that, we've contracted with E-Mobility Group. We formed a 2-county regional coalition in part to get state funding from the CEC, and we've also formed an EV working group, all to provide input on that plan. And the plan is to have that in place within the coming couple months. And so given the board recess in July, it will end up coming to you in August. We'll have a presentation on what the outcomes are. And then for the second program, EVSC incentives, so that stakeholder engagement, a part of the stakeholder engagement process is specifically targeting feedback to prioritize EV charging infrastructure programs and understanding what design elements to incorporate into that second program. And so they're kind of staggered in the release. All right, so to achieve climate goals, it's not enough to decarbonize electricity and electrify everything to run off that electricity. You also have to do one more thing, which is to say harness energy efficiency and make sure all of these newly electrified loads are integrated within the larger grid. And so we have to do this to ensure that we're taking a least cost pathway to deep decarbonization. So this particular program area focuses specifically on that. And we contracted with GridWorks, which is a nonprofit kind of boutique firm that specializes in grid integration and stakeholder engagement, industry stakeholder engagement for grid integration policies and activities. And they'll be leading a very brisk stakeholder engagement process focused a bit more on industry and state policymakers that's going to be launching next week. And so by the end of Q3, we will have kind of an updated discussion paper that incorporates industry and other stakeholder feedback into what are the different options that a CCA could take, specifically SVCE, to help promote grid integration. And kind of falling out of that will be a recommendation for what program or programs to pursue. And so the expectation is we'd go out to RFP right after we have that recommendation. Okay. So education and outreach is the fifth area, and there are two programs. Our Customer Resource Center initiative is the first, and we plan to issue an RFI this quarter to ensure that really we understand the breadth of technologies available to help educate and engage our customers in understanding their energy usage and vehicle and building electrification opportunities. And then based on the results of that RFI, we'd go out to RFP. Then the second one is the community engagement grants, and this is a program that launched actually last year. And so these grants focus on engaging under-reached customer segments, such as low income, English as a second language, et cetera. So we're gathering information through these outreach events that will really help inform program design to better serve those customer segments, in addition to the primary purpose of that program, which is outreach. To those events to educate them, to those groups to educate them about energy and SVCE and what their options are to decarbonize. Okay, so the next and final program area is innovation. And this, the goal here is to really leverage our unique position as a community-owned electricity provider in the heart of Silicon Valley to support the innovation ecosystem in addressing really key technical, market, and policy barriers to achieving our climate targets. And so there are two programs. Innovation Partners is where we're engaging with incubators, accelerators, universities, industry research labs, and other sorts of innovation ecosystems to really raise visibility of kind of where we see the need for more innovation. And building electrification is a big area, specifically retrofitting existing buildings. And so as a part of that, we are sponsoring a couple different challenge events, the Stanford Clean Tech Challenge, which is this coming weekend. Justin and I will be there mentoring students all weekend on the challenges of building electrification retrofits. So that's the challenge area that we submitted, and we're looking forward to seeing what the students come up with as far as kind of ideas to tackle these problems. And then there's another event, the Powerhouse SunCode Hackathon, which is next month. And so SVC is also a part of sponsoring that event. And as a sponsor for these innovation events, you again get to submit a challenge area. So we'll be deciding whether to submit the same challenge area or maybe focus on a different area. But this is really an opportunity to direct all of these great minds that we have in this area towards the needs that we see in this space that are really not represented. Okay, and then Innovation On-Ramp is the second program, which is to provide grant funding for pilot projects, innovative pilot projects with external partners. So this one was published on our website towards the end of March, and we're doing a so-called soft launch. We do anticipate having program support on board at some point in time, but the RFP for that program support is going to be issued in April. So we wanted to kind of work out the kinks of the program and not do a big press release at this point in time without having that support in place. And so we have a backlog of interest. This is a program that I think really kind of highlights our, where we are in the state and in Silicon Valley, and highlights kind of what sort of unique value proposition that we can add that maybe a PG&E can't add. And so we've had just a lot of interest since the adoption of the decarb roadmap. And so big list of people we've reached out to that have said they want to know when it's launched. And so we have a lot of, we expect a lot of applications, basically. Okay. So that's the summary of where we are with the program's roadmap. And there are a lot of activities in progress, but as you can tell from the colors in this chart, it's more colorful coming up. So there's a lot of work to be done, and things are going to be launched. We'll have a number of launches in the next quarter as well. So we're looking forward to that. And then there's one more part of this presentation that's quite brief. So I'll go ahead and cover the next few slides very briefly, and then open it up for questions if that works for you all. Okay. All right. So through the REACH code effort.
We have some antics going on the computers up here. Pardon us.
It keeps it lively. Children.
It's a long day. Please.
Okay, great. All right, so through the REACH code effort, we've definitely seen a need to really elevate workforce training and development to its own program area. In what was presented and adopted in December, the program's roadmap, we kind of embedded workforce training into the different programs, but we think it kind of deserves its own place, its own program area, its own kind of earmarked budget. Since there is a lot of work that needs to be done building capacity in the marketplace to really enable this transformation that we're trying to catalyze. And there is a virtuous cycle with workforce development as well. A well-trained workforce can accelerate or will accelerate decarbonization, and decarbonization does create local workforce opportunities accessible through training. So I think the way that we're approaching the development of this program is how we approach the development of the entire roadmap and all of the programs. That is to say, first listen, engage stakeholders, do background research, and then the other two principles are ensure what we're doing is additive. It's leveraging the activities that already exist and filling in gaps where we can fill in gaps, and to be inclusive. So this is, I think, a really unique opportunity to bring other parts of the workforce and other parts of our customer base kind of into the fold. And so that's another kind of principle that we have when we're looking into what form workforce training and development program could take. So we've already started some stakeholder outreach to NOVA, community colleges, labor, and industry associations, and some of this has really been kind of sparked by the REACH code effort and the stakeholder engagement that we've started through the REACH code effort. But we're very much in the kind of framing stage. And so what we'd like from the board is certainly some direction on whether to pursue this program area or not via kind of adoption or not of this staff proposal to earmark funding. And I think in the proposal would be to continue to do research and then come back to the board with an update on like what we think would be the most effective program design for this particular area, and then launch it. So, okay, so that's it. How about I just skip to I have a couple more notes on the budget. So we included one chart on the budget. This is a summary chart. So through the organizational budgeting process, the board approved 2% of operating revenues for programs, which is the gold band at the top of the chart. So we have around 2/3 of the total program's budget for FY19 and FY20 allocated to specific program areas. And that's the color bars that you see. And of this allocated budget, we're on track to spend all of that we've requested within these fiscal years. And then the second chart just shows the same chart before, but with this particular proposal, this request for $100K in FY19 and $100K in FY20 for workforce training and development. So thanks very much for your attention, and I look forward to answering any questions you have.
Great, thank you very much. Any questions from the board? Yes, Member Ellenberg.
Thank you so much for that report. I have some questions about the workforce development piece.
Who is your target audience? Are you looking at community college students, four-year students, people that are already in the workforce and looking to transition?
So right now it would be all of the above. And so we've had conversations already with community colleges, and so certainly, catching students when they are in the initial training phase and really preparing them for a decades-long career in building decarb, like that would be a really, that would be an influential point to have an impact. But there are, of course, a lot of other contracts already out there working and have experience with, mixed fuel homes. And so there's some retraining as well that could happen, like with different workforce development organizations like NOVA, et cetera. And so at this point in time, everything's kind of on the table, and it's really the background research that will help us kind of prioritize. But I think if we see 2-3 different opportunities, there could also be the opportunity to split up this budget or potentially come back to you and ask for additional budget if we think that there's a need for more based on the need that we're seeing in the industry.
And what about summer internships? Is that something that would be practical here? Are there enough kind of hands-on or exposure opportunities?
Summer
in your office?
internships specifically for like electricians, or you mean within SVCE itself?
Whatever you're looking for in terms of workforce development. I'm thinking about ways that we all have our own social media and outreach components and can help amplify SVCE's efforts to identify workforce potential partners, and if there is an internship program or some kind of pipeline that we can hook people into, that's a very tangible way for us to support that effort.
I see, that's great. Well, we definitely have summer interns at SVCE, and I think that it's good to know that we may have some support and recruitment for that. I think for the workforce development and training program that's described here, it's a bit more focused on so-called blue collar or so-called blue-green collar, helping contractors, electricians, plumbers, et cetera, transition into more of a green collar job. But that's kind of more the target focus at this point, as opposed to working specifically within SVC.
And I have one other question. Are you connected already with, bless you, the Career Tech, what is that called? The name just went out of my head. It's the Joint Powers School District on Hillsdale.
My brother teaches that.
SGCTE, Silicon Valley Career Technical Education. Slowly, it came, piece by piece.
I understand.
Because that's a terrific venue for getting students at the high school level on-site work. They've got labs, they've got facilities, and this might be a new opportunity if they're not already offering programs in this space. It's exactly the audience that you're talking about.
Great.
And I'm happy offline to facilitate that and talk about that more with you. Thank you.
The line here, Member Sinks, Member Smith, and then Member Tovar.
So can you remind us again what a virtual power plant is?
Yeah, I think I did skip that.
I know I knew once.
So a virtual power plant is a cloud-based aggregation of distributed resources that are being controlled at the same time to ramp up and ramp down. And the idea is that, let's just say you have 5 different battery storage installations at different C&I customers. If you discharge them at the same time and ramp them up, it's kind of equivalent to a power plant ramping up that amount. So that's where the terminology of virtual power plant.
It's like distributed generation or perhaps demand, but the idea that you could control this as a power plant of a lot of small things.
Exactly.
Small generators, okay. I am very impressed that we're going to get reach code model language out tomorrow. I was, frankly, maybe a little skeptical in the beginning that we were going to be able to do this work so quickly, but can you remind us of if we miss this cycle on reach codes, what's the next big update?
So the building code is a 3-year
Right,
code,
okay.
and so then the next statewide building code update will be 3 years from the coming January. However,
Yeah.
you don't have to adopt.
It could be off-cycle.
It can be off cycle.
It's just that, frankly, for all the folks that have to pay attention to these things, we know we have their attention once every 3 years because they're having to adopt changes from the state. So that's why this was so key. So I'd like to show appreciation for your getting this done and giving our staffs plenty of time to think through it with our planning departments. I think it's really important. I'd asked that the presentation earlier by Panama be recorded. I think for all of our fellow council members, or even us that couldn't make it, and those staffs, anybody having half an hour, 45 minutes to look at that video, I think will be highly motivated to really take this effort seriously. So I really appreciate staff's work in bringing our speaker in this evening, as well as your work.
Could I maybe mention one thing just for
Yeah.
the REACH code effort? I mean, it's certainly an all hands on deck project, a very
Yeah.
big effort, but it's being led by John Supp. So definitely wanted to acknowledge him. I think he's here. Oh, he's working with it. The webinar's tomorrow morning, so that's symptomatic of the dedication. Yeah, so he's been the fearless leader in.
And now a question. Well, a comment followed by a question. So I do appreciate that we're engaged with Stanford, and I think I'm very happy to see on the innovation front that we're beginning to get hooked up with the academic community. You know, in my attendance at the Stanford Summit in June, the Energy Summit, and, different meetings hosted by E3 and Stanford and all, right? The dominant players in this business have more than enough mind share, and we need to get some of it. So my question then is, the energy, as much as I very much appreciate Stanford and your engagement with them, and they're in our county, the Energy Institute at Haas, at Cal, is very influential in state policy. Severin Borenstein and others. Are we engaged with them in some way, I'm hoping, or can we be?
Yes, we are, and the reason I laughed is Amy goes to school at Berkeley now. She's getting her MBA. She knows Severin and that entire group very well.
Who's just joined the Cal ISO board, right?
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
And so we have actually had a meeting. Both Don Bray and Amy went up, met with Severin and all his researchers, talking about our portfolio and what we want to do. So I think we're making small inroads, and maybe you want to add anything to that?
So the annual conference, which I'm sure you're familiar with, the Power Conference. So SVC did sponsor that this year. So that was.
Oh, you did? Okay.
We did. I think there were 2 CCAs. East Bay sponsored it as well, but we were the other ones. So that took place, I think, a few weeks ago. And in addition to that opportunity, we have had conversations specifically with Severin Borenstein on rate design. That's naturally a very important area for him,
yeah.
through kind of the C&I clean power offerings discussions, and bounced around some ideas for different pilot rate designs. And so whether it's through either the C&I clean power offerings or maybe through Innovation On-Ramp as a pilot program, we'd love to continue to engage with him and the rest of the Energy Institute group on any particular opportunities as they arise. I think it's a bit opportunistic at this point, given he's quite busy right now, but we're certainly looking to try to build.
That was a wonderful answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Smith.
Shifting gears considerably, you mentioned I think, something about the cadence of these reports. So this is the first quarterly update. So in the next quarter, I wanted to clarify that the peel the onion approach a little bit more. Okay. So you have provided tonight a summary that I counted 6 pages. You provided a set of revised program briefs, which was very interesting to go through. That's approximately, if we add the new one, it would be about 39 pages. And then there is a data sheet coming. So
Right.
my question is, in approximately 3 months at our next board meeting, which will be, isn't that July? It'll be August, because we'll miss July. So are we going to look forward to this level of comprehensive updates and progress every quarter?
I think the bulk of that really is the program briefs. And although, it is a number of pages, you'll notice most of those were created for the December meeting, and what's shown are red lines for revisions. And so the actual revisions, that there were only a few, I think, that were revised significantly, and they weren't like substantive revisions. It was more providing an update. Yeah, we hired this consultant. The timeline is still consistent. We have these partners in place now, things like that. So I think it's really the 6 or 7 page attachment 1 update that's new content. Although the highlights in the beginning part, some of that was drawn from our just general communications and outreach, and the 1 page kind of PR version would be drawing on attachment 1. That is all to say, I think, I'm not going to say it wasn't staff work, because it was, because it was work from across the organization, but maybe the page length based on attachment 2 isn't quite reflective of the work. So I think we're comfortable with this level of update. If you want less information, we could give you less information, or if you want us to change the type of information we're giving you, I think we'd be very receptive to understanding what would be the most useful.
I think I appreciate the level of especially as we're launching, it's especially nice to get all the detail. So we'll play it by ear, but I'm not complaining. I think it's a good level. And of course, we're looking forward to seeing the whatever you call it, the 1 pager. I'd call it a data sheet, but it'll fit on one side.
I think it's 1 page front and back.
Okay.
You want a super miracle.
So
So you like the Consumer Reports
and then there's
version.
going to be the wallet version, so that the board members can go see my agency. So we're all looking forward to seeing that when it comes out, and I mean the other board members can speak to it, but I appreciate the level of detail. I guess the one question I have is that, so you printed a whole bunch of you bound together all the program books into one, like, booklet.
Mm-hmm.
And are you going to be updating those every quarter or once a year, or?
I imagine that you're talking about kind of the beautiful, stylized, glossy page roadmap. I imagine once we do the 1-year update, then maybe every single year we'd provide a revised version. That one, the intent wasn't to do that every quarter.
Okay, so it'll be more like a program yearbook or something like that.
Yeah.
We can all sign our pictures. Okay, all right, that's enough. But I appreciate the level of detail, and that's a great report. And despite, I think when you were transitioning, we were being a little silly, but that doesn't mean that we weren't listening and that we don't think it's awesome.
Thank you, Director Tovar.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Bailey, I had promised myself earlier that I wasn't going to say anything tonight because I wanted to get home and watch the Sharks play. But it doesn't look like that's going to happen. Plus, this discussion here, it's something I'm really passionate about, sort of the workforce training and development. And I'm going to share a little bit about my past, and I'm hoping that along with you and Darish, maybe you guys can come visit me at my office because I think I can help with this. I've been in higher education for the last 25 years, spent 18 years at Stanford, and then recently joined ITU in San Jose International Technological University as a director of business development and community college partnerships. And I'm going to host a group of up to 300 community college students at the end of the month for a leadership conference. So there might be a connection here. In addition to where we offer master and PhD degrees in STEM programs that may be useful as well. But I want to be able to help you with sort of what you're doing here, because before City Council I spent 4 years on the college board and 8 years on the K through 12 board. So my whole life's been around education, and this is something I'm really passionate about. And I love what you guys are doing. I really, truly do. And I think it's something that's it's needed, and I would love, along I'm sure with other directors as well, to help out in any way possible, but also give you some exposure and sort of open some doors for you as well. Okay, thank you.
That'd be
Thank
fantastic.
All right, Director Corrigan.
Speaking of the Sharks, thank you, Amy. Great report. I'm out of here. I completely support this program, and I'm sorry to leave early, but second period's about to begin, and I am so proud of the work you're doing. So congratulations to you and the rest of my directors. I hope you will support this.
Go Sharks. Go Sharks.
Thank you, Director Corrigan, for staying. I'm going to move to public comment, and then we'll bring it back. So, Mr. Tulea.
Hi, James Talea, resident of Sunnyvale. There's a lot here. I'm just going to make some real quick comments about a few topics. Overall, I strongly support the staff recommendation, and especially the workforce development and training. As I mentioned before, I used to work at PG&E, and in the efficiency programs, there was always a workforce education and training. Same deal, and it had its own budget, its own thing. It's so important for bringing the workforce along, and it's the targets that were mentioned, both bringing new students up and into the right fields, as well as those who are already there, because they're the ones that are talking to the customers all the time. Residential customers are not generally well informed, and they're looking for people to guide them. So being able to help the workforce in our area guide the customers better is critical. And another angle on it is the fact that many of these contractors are part of larger organizations that have a lot of sway and influence, not only with the legislature, but with the CPUC. We went so far as to create a whole Western HVAC Performance Alliance so that we could sort of have everybody work together and get input. And I was the chair of that for about two and a half years for all the HVAC stuff. So it's critical to bring them into the fold. And I think this actually just starts the process. And I would anticipate you're going to want to come back for more budget to do more things, because this is such a critical piece in the middle of everything. And I appreciate very much all the REACH code efforts. It's so important to catch this 3-year cycle. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wishing to speak? If not, I'll bring it back to the board. Any other comments? Yes, Member Gibbons.
Thank you. Should I take these off? So I do not mean this to be controversial. I think it's an important discussion about what SVCE is all about, and that is changing the thought process of what decarbonization is and working to do a decarbonization environments with buildings in particular. And the discussion of the workforce is really rings very true with me, because a topic that we're all dealing with is housing. And there's legislation that says that housing has to have solar on all new housing going forward. We need to have people trained for that. people need to understand how that solar is going to impact the electrical use of the building and how much solar to put on them to affect the electrical use in the building. And Panama's presentation, I thought, just brought it home so incredibly. We worry so much about the cost of housing. He said 20% of people's budgets pay their utility bills, and we could reduce those utility bills substantively, and they are the primary source of payday loans to pay utility bills. And then you look at jobs. So I'm just saying that single source solutions, they're great, but they need to blend together. We need to talk about housing, we need to talk about energy, we need to talk about jobs. And all of that needs to come together. And I think what we're doing here and in these programs across the board, the EVs, all of those are going to make living here more cost effective and provide jobs and good salaries for all the people who work here, because the salary differential is, again, no minor aspect of why it's costly to live here. So as we go through these programs and some of the points that you are all bringing up, I'd like to ask us all to think multidimensionally and not piecemeal, because it is a puzzle. My favorite phrase, it's everything, it's a puzzle, and it's a Rubik's Cube of puzzles. And I think what we're doing here is so extraordinary, and I want to encourage us to talk with our councils and our legislators to understand what this kind of program can do for our state and our housing.
Thank you. Any other comments? I just will add then my sincere thanks. I'm just thoroughly impressed by how well thought out our strategy is and how it's being unveiled. Especially thank you on the REACH codes. I'm excited that it's coming out tomorrow. As most of you know, Mountain View did sign up to engage in that, and so I think we'll be on. I was worried about the timing and whether we would be able to have the resources to do it, even at our mostly at our city level, but with your assistance and direction, I think we're going to get there. So I'm really excited about that. And then I really want to thank staff and Girish for taking the workforce issue seriously. This was something that I guess last year when we started to get some pushback at the state level from the legislature, I started to do a little bit of digging around and asking around about what's the rub with CCAs, and as Mr. Talea mentioned, there are organizations that it comes down to jobs and job creation, job loss, and so I feel very strongly that that's important for us to engage and to be inclusive. And really, I think the focus that I was really looking at was retraining for potential as the industry moves and changes, to be able to bring folks along and working families, workers along in that. So I think it is important, and it makes sense for us to carve it out into a separate bucket. And so I'm really excited about that. So thank you for taking that seriously. Yes, Mr. CEO.
Just closing comment. This has really been a team effort on the programs, and just the culture that you've inculcated at SVCE and that we're continuing as it's like multiple hats, and I need to recognize Hillary. She put together the workforce piece, and she's in charge of Legend Right. And she's working it from the angle that you talk about too. Mm-hmm. But this is just a really cool staff effort.
Yeah. Well, thank you all. It really is cool. So with that, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll be happy to make a motion.
Second. All right.
Would you like to know what the motion is?
Yes, please.
Oh. So I move that we accept this Decarbonization Strategy and Roadmaps Program Update and Briefs, attachments 1 and 2, that we adopt resolution number 2019-07, which is attachment 3, to approve the budget request and associated program brief, attachment 4, for workforce development and training programs totaling $200,000 for FY 19 and 20.
Great, with multiple seconds. So motion by Member Sinks, and I'm going to take the second from Member Ellenberg. Any other discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you so much.